For what? For a little bit of money. There's more to life than a little money, you know.
Hi there, and welcome to Baseball by Design. I am SportsLogos.net minor league baseball correspondent Paul Caputo, broadcasting live, as always, from the Sunday Helmet Hall of Fame in my basement in Fort Collins, Colorado.
And I'm Dan Simon, podcasting from the Studio Simon headquarters at historic Bowman Field in Louisville, Kentucky.
Dan, we are talking this week about an independent professional team. This team plays in Fargo/Moorhead in North Dakota and Minnesota. It is two different states, those two cities. They recently unveiled an alternate identity that is a lot of fun, based on a grisly death scene in an iconic movie, Fargo. Interesting subject matter for a baseball identity. Have you ever had to take on something, that sort of grisly and make it try to feel sort of whimsical and baseball identity-ish?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
The thing that comes to mind had nothing to do with me, and we've discussed it on this podcast, were the London Rippers, which was an ill-conceived brand identity for an independent team in London, Ontario, that featured Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
Even though the owner said it wasn't Jack the Ripper, it was Jack the Ripper.
It was very clearly.
So I think that Woodchippers gives that a run for the money, but they're two pretty grisly things.
At least Woodchippers is based on a fictional grisly murder scene. We were talking about a different identity previously, and you mentioned there are times when you are deeply involved in the conversations around what's this brand going to be. You come up with names, you come up with concepts. And then there are times when a client will come to you and just say, this is what's in my head. I would like you to make it art, basically. So I would think in this instance, if someone came to you and said, hey, look, there's a scene in a movie where Steve Buscemi gets fed into a wood chipper, we'd like you to make a baseball logo out of it. It's a pretty clear and pretty specific direction. And you could, you would just take it and probably come up with something fun and whimsical.
Yeah. And I will say this logo is fun and whimsical, despite the fact that there's a foot sticking out of the wood chipper, just like there was in the movie. And you look at it and that was a memorable scene. Yeah. And to be able to use it for a baseball identity where it doesn't seem inappropriate, kudos to them.
I mean, it's an interesting conversation because it's a team that has a pretty classic identity, based on a bird, as many baseball logos are, and it's fairly conservative and fairly traditional. And they don't do a ton of alternate identities. I feel like alternate identities with minor league baseball teams can be a little bit like, people who wait until they're like 28 years old to have their first drink, right? And then they just go absolutely wild with it. I don't know if it's a good parallel, Dan, but like a team that goes many years without doing an alternate identity, and then they're like, fine, we're going to do an alternate identity. And it's going to be based on Steve Buscemi being fed into a wood chipper. I don't know. I feel like they go pretty far to the other extreme. I'm not sure if that's your experience professionally as a designer in minor league baseball, but I don't know if that parallel works or not.
Sometimes you make some strange analogies, and we'll put this one into that category. So,
all right. Well, we got a bunch of conversations coming up, Dan. This is going to be a fun episode. Eli Swanson is here from the team itself. John Werthern, who created the brand, is going to be here. We'll talk to him about all those design decisions and what he was charged with. And then Baseball by Design's official film analyst and critic, James Christopher, is going to be here, the host of Ballpark Nation. And then you'll be back with a Studio Simon Stumper trivia question at the end of the episode. Looking forward to seeing where that goes. We'll see you at the end of the episode, Dan.
Yeah, it won't be long, so there's not too far to go until I'm back.
This is why you are a professional podcaster, Dan. That wordplay is what we pay you for. We'll see you on the other side.
Okay, see ya.
All right, everyone, welcome to the podcast. Eli Swanson, who is the Director of Communications and Broadcasting for the Fargo-Moorhead RedHawks. Eli, how's it going?
Going great. Thanks for having me.
As we are recording this right now, you are watching the college basketball tournament on a big screen TV, big flat screen TV at work. I kind of love that. I love this time of year so much. Baseball getting going, college basketball tournament, and just an absolute flood of alternate identities from baseball teams. And so this is super fun. I definitely want to talk with you about an alternate brand that really stood out among all of these many alternate brands that we're seeing here the last couple of months, the wood chippers. But before we get into that, let's talk about your RedHawks here. Why is a team in Fargo, North Dakota called the RedHawks?
Yeah, so our team, we started play all the way back in 1996. Back then, we were in the Northern League, kind of one of the independent leagues that restarted back in the 90s. A couple years in, the Redhawks joined, and they had a name the team contest, just like many of the teams do. And they narrowed it down to a couple finalists, but Red Hawks was submitted by a guy who was a air traffic controller at one of the airports around Fargo-Moorhead. And his thing as an air traffic controller when he was up in the tower was he saw these red-tailed hawks swooping around and banking in and out, and I don't know, maybe amongst the planes. I'm not sure. I haven't ever been up in an air traffic control tower, but he submitted that name, and they liked it for whatever reason. That was the one that stood out, and that was the one they picked and the one we've been ever since.
Now, this is Fargo, North Dakota, but Moorhead, Minnesota. Am I right about that?
That's correct. Yep.
So which town are you actually in?
So our stadium is in Fargo. We're based out of Fargo, but Fargo Moorhead is they're kind of the two sister cities right on either side of the Red River of the North in Fargo, North Dakota, and Moorhead, Minnesota.
Okay. All right. I don't know how many other teams exist. Do you know, are there other teams out there that have a sort of dual city, dual state signifier like that?
That's a good question. I'm not sure about the two states. I'd have to do some research on that.
Well, it is the North Dakota side of things that's getting quite a bit of attention these days with this alternate identity. The wood chippers. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. The movie Fargo was an important part of my formative years here. The Fargo Woodchippers is an identity that plays off of a grisly murder scene, or at least disposing of a body scene from the Coen brothers movie Fargo. What in the world gave you guys the idea to make an alternate brand out of this grisly murder scene from that movie from 30 years ago?
Pretty much since teams started doing the alternate identities, of course, people in baseball were talking about it all the time. What would we be? What are some of the options? Maybe what could we be? Are we going to be something that's one of the wacky laws or some other connection? And I think time and time again, people just kept coming back to let's just keep it simple. What is Fargo most known for? What is the thing that when people think of Fargo, whether they're local residents or anywhere around the world, it's probably the wood chipper. And over the last 2 or 3 years, the conversations really picked up and we actually kind of started getting the wheels into motion a little more in terms of actually thinking of the logo, getting some of the jersey designs and caps and merch and all of that. And ultimately, we just kept going back to the wood chippers because for us, that was just kind of the thing that made the most sense in all regards.
So when I wrote this up for sportslogos.net, I found online the fact that the wood chipper itself is available to see if you're visiting North Dakota and you want to swing by the visitor center in Fargo, you can actually see this wood chipper. Have you been out to see the wood chipper?
I have, yeah, and we filmed a little like fun teaser video the day we released it, and we released that video too. And we actually filmed that not with the actual wood chipper because they actually have two. A lot of
Oh,
people don't know that. I think sometimes some tourists who might mean better accidentally take photos with sort of the stage wood chipper, which is outside, open 24/7. Anyone can just pull up to the CVB there and take a photo. But inside, they actually have the prop from the movie, like you said too. So I think it's pretty remarkable. You go by there at a time you'd think there'd be just nothing going on. Tuesday morning at 10:30, and there, without a doubt, there'll be somebody in there driving through for whatever reason, youth sports tournament or just making a road trip, and they decided to stop to see it.
too funny. Now, I know that this alternate identity has really made quite a splash nationally. For locals in Fargo, are they tired of the wood chipper? When you brand your local team as the Woodchippers, is it more popular nationally than it would be locally because people are sick of the Woodchipper?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a split. I think it probably goes pretty in line with what people think of the movie itself. There's definitely one school of people who are happy that Fargo is mentioned, happy the area is kind of recognized in some kind of greater circumstance. And then on the other side, there are definitely people with the movie. I think primarily the issue people take with it is that they think the accent is, played up to 11 or 12 when people don't really talk like that. Although often people will say we don't talk like that while throwing in a you betcha or, don't you know, whatever, something like that. So I'm not sure we can really take them at their word in that regard. But yeah, I think with the wood chipper, we've primarily seen mostly positive feedback. There are definitely some people who are ready to move on to something else and maybe wish the movie that we were known for didn't involve that exact subject matter. But I think by and large, people are pretty fond of it.
To my knowledge, this is the only minor league baseball logo, primary, secondary, alternate, however, that actually features a human being murdered here. This is a human being murdered. Did you guys research that? Are there any other human beings being murdered logos out there?
We didn't research that specifically, but we definitely did talk about how we can make this not too grisly. I think John Worthen, who made the logos, did a really good job of kind of adding that cartoon effect a little bit on the stirrup and the cleat there.
Yeah.
Because there's definitely a version of this logo that is probably, not super safe, especially for kids and, family friendly fun, which we're all about here. So that was definitely a little bit of a concern and something we definitely kind of sought to make right from the very beginning. Might have to do some research on the, murder front.
Yeah. Just from this offseason alone, we had the frozen iguanas, and and there was the one logo where the iguana's on his back holding the bat. He looks dead, but he's not dead, and he's also an iguana, not a person. So, this is we're gonna have to get our baseball by design research squad on this question of do we have?
Yeah, I like that one. I liked in that episode too, with the designer having to make some changes because of potential references that Major League Baseball wasn't a fan of.
That was Ryan Foose who mentioned that in light of everything that went wrong with the Oyster Catchers logo,
Right.
that Major League Baseball was being was being careful with that. You all are in the American Association, which is a partner league with Major League Baseball. Do you have those same concerns of if Major League Baseball disapproves that it may be circumvented, or do you have more freedom as a partner league than an affiliated team would?
Yeah, we definitely have more freedom. I'm not sure if someone really had a problem with it, maybe we'd hear about it,
Mhm.
but we definitely don't have those same lines of communication just constantly ongoing like an affiliated team would have.
Right.
It's more of like a, bureaucratic logistical advantage for us to have that partner league connection.
Sure. I think about the fact that like the Durham Bulls can't really have like family movie night. Everyone come out and watch Bull Durham because
Right.
that is a rated R movie. There's some racy scenes and some spicy language in that one. I don't really recall, but I don't think that Fargo is exactly a movie that you can play on the big screen and fans go out in the outfield and watch the movie after the game.
No, definitely not. At least now with some prior warning, I think. We've looked into that a little bit in terms of if we would be able to show it on the big screen at some point, maybe as like a add-on event after a game or something like that. And I think it would be possible, but as of now, we don't really have any plans to do that. But we definitely have to get maybe some parent notes or something if kids wanted to stay and watch that.
Have you reached out to Steve Buscemi to throw a first pitch?
We haven't yet, but we're hoping to maybe reach out to some of those folks here before the first Woodchippers game.
Now, in the design of the logo itself, was there a lot of back and forth, or did John nail it pretty quickly? Was it like, were you guys back and forth in terms of, like you said, how grisly, how ferocious versus friendly, that sort of thing? Were there a lot of iterations of this?
There were a fair number of iterations, but at the beginning, we were probably a super great client for him because from talking to him and then maybe 2 or 3 days later, I think he had a draft of the logo that is pretty similar to the one we ended up going with. It's really sort of towards the latter part of the process where we started kind of getting down to the nitty gritty details and, what we wanted to include, what we didn't. one of the big debates was, do we want to include the snow and ice in the word mark and kind of on the wood chipper itself as sort of a nod to the winter part of both living here and also then the movie, or not? And that was a big conversation in the office. But by and large, we had the main thing kind of fleshed out pretty early on.
So you guys have a fairly conservative primary identity. RedHawks is a pretty traditional name. The bird-based logo, it's something we see a fair amount of in minor league baseball. And you don't do a ton of alternate identities. You're not exactly dipping your toe in the alternative identities here, right? Like you're really jumping in with 2 feet. What were the organizational conversations
Just
around
one
that?
foot, one sticking out top.
I teed that one up for you, Eli. I didn't mean to,
Thank
but I
you. Thank you.
absolutely did. All right, you're jumping in with one severed foot into this alternate identity landscape here, but that was a decision organizationally, I'm sure. Why, after all these years, how come now?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, last year was our 30th season. This is our 31st, 30th anniversary, depending on how you want to look at it. And we've been talking about doing this for a while, and it just kind of came to be that both the 30th anniversary of the team and also the 30th anniversary of the movie coincided here in 2026. So everything kind of worked out that this was the best time for us. And, like you said, the RedHawks, we've had more or less the same logo, basically the same uniforms. We had pinstripes at the very beginning, and about a decade ago, we took those off. But really, other than that, it's been more or less constant. And, we're lucky that we're a pretty recognized brand in the area and, have a lot of families and generations of people that have kind of grown up with the RedHawks now that we've been around. So with the Woodchippers, it was kind of a chance to do something completely different. And it was definitely a learning experience for all of us, I think, just kind of that first chance. Really, any of us who work here have had the chance to work with a completely different color palette and do some, off the wall designs and merch and, scoreboard graphics. They're just completely different from what we normally do. So all of that has been both really fun and also kind of, I guess, creatively challenging and stimulating to try some new stuff.
Are you going to do anything with the flap hat and the uniform? Is there going to be a flap hat?
We did debate. There was a brief bit there in the winter when the caps looked like they might take a little longer than we expected to come in. And we did say, the bomber hats, you can fold up the flaps. So the players in a worst case scenario could wear those on the field. Might get a little warm, but luckily the caps have arrived and, we're going to avoid that situation.
Well, speaking of things that are arriving, I'm noticing a ton of boxes behind you there. Clearly, the response has been pretty good out there, huh? You got a lot of orders to fulfill?
Yeah, it's been really good so far. I think it's definitely a first in terms of the speed of needing to reorder stuff.
Yeah.
Normally we can kind of bank on the general sort of curve of the season, ramping up in May and going through the summer, and the demand for merch kind of remaining, somewhat close to what it has been in previous years. And this has just been a totally different experience for us. Like I said, something we haven't done before. So it's been really cool. We've had orders from, all over the country into Canada as well. So it's been a fun process. And at the same time, a little bit stressful too, in trying to make sure we have everything kind of both on hand and kept track of in terms of the orders.
So there are 5 games where the RedHawks will be playing as the Woodchippers. As the director of communications and broadcasting, what's your perspective on, is the team that night? Is it the Woodchippers? Is that how it goes out in the press release? Is that how it is on the scoreboard? Are you guys the Woodchippers for those 5 games?
I think that's what we're going to land on. It's something I hadn't really fully considered all the different ramifications of until recently, because, you start to think, okay, are the broadcasters going to call them the Woodchippers that day? Are they going to call them the RedHawks? And I'm not sure we've totally decided on that, but I think for the sake of, kind of full immersion, probably just going with all Woodchippers is the best bet for those couple of nights.
Well, congratulations on just a really fun alternate brand. It's hard to think that, that it's still possible to shake up this whole idea of alternate brands out there, because there have been so many things that have been done, and to stand out in this very populated world of minor league baseball alternate brands right now was really an accomplishment. So congratulations on that. It's really fun. And for folks who have not seen the movie, I think you have to go see the movie before you can go to one of these games, right? Like you can't show up for a Woodchippers game not having seen this movie.
Yeah, I think it definitely will add to the enjoyment of the overall experience if you know some of those references coming in for sure.
June 12, July 10, July 22, August 11, and August 29. Those are the games. Eli, thank you so much. This has been great fun. Where can people find the Woodchippers gear? Where can people order one of the hats that I see in those boxes back there? Where can people find the team online?
Yeah, so all the Woodchipper stuff is kind of located at fargowoodchippers.com. You can also hit the direct link to the shop, which is fargowoodchippers.shop. Or if you're interested in any RedHawks stuff, it's fmredhawks.com.
Hey, how do the people of Moorhead feel about this after you got to do something for the Minnesotan fans now next?
Yeah, I'm actually a Moorhead resident myself, and I
Yeah,
think all of us we're still basking in the glory of our second straight state high school hockey tournament win, which is a big deal in Minnesota.
it sure
So
is.
I
Yeah,
think,
congratulations.
they're slowly getting over the Woodchippers by maybe celebrating that win a little longer.
There you go. Perfect. That sounds good. Eli, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. John Worthen of Worthen Design. John, you're becoming a regular now, I think, on the podcast, John. You've been here a number of
Yeah,
times, some fun brands that we've talked about in the past. This time, maybe the most fun. I don't know. A pretty fun brand here. The Fargo Woodchippers. Obviously, the most important question here: how many times did you watch that scene in Fargo to develop this brand for the team?
yeah, really, right? I did a lot of YouTube like clips. Yeah, it's a lot. It's kind of, you say it's most fun. I'd say it's the most demented fun, it definitely gets a laugh as soon as they see
It
that
does. It
baseball,
does.
shoe hanging out there. So
So
sweet.
like I said, you've been on the podcast previously. We were, talking about the Bismarck Larks, talking about the Richmond Flying Mummies most recently, the Fill It Up Regulars, which was a fun one, the
Yeah,
gas station themed one,
yeah.
the Minot Hot Tots was a really fun one. So you have a penchant for fun brands, but like I said, this one might be the most fun. It's a pretty grisly scene, right? Like it's a pretty
Yeah.
grisly moment, and you were asked to take that and turn it into something fun for a family-friendly baseball logo based on a not family-friendly movie, right? Like, so
Yeah,
what would
correct.
when you're as a designer, how do you what's your approach there? How do you take a grisly murder scene and turn it into a family-friendly baseball logo?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? Well, first you got to get that shoe on the foot, so that you can start going, okay, well, all right, it's a baseball player that went in there. And then instead of, body parts flying out, we should have some baseballs flying out or something, like this is a baseball making machine, kind of a thing. And so that
Hmm.
was kind of the approach we took, was kind of like, hey, we're gonna throw this person in obviously let's pay respects to the movie,
Yeah.
but let's have some tongue-in-cheek moments, right, where baseballs come flying out instead of other things. So, and then on top of that too, having some fun with the characterization of the actual chipper,
Right.
kind of turning him into like this little bit, devious, little wood chipper guy that's going around and grabbing every baseball player he can.
It is a complicated machine, right? Like, and
Yeah,
I'm looking at the logo now as we're having this conversation. There's a lot of sort of crazy angles, and it's a complicated machine. Put on top of that, you've got the leg sticking out of it. You've got the thing that, the baseball with the hat flying out of it. And then you've got the text, Fargo Woodchippers, in sort of a wood grain pattern there. There's a lot going on. How
a
do you
lot.
how do you simplify that enough to make it a baseball logo?
It was a challenge, to be honest with you. The more we talked about it, and the client wanted a lot of those elements to be, really specific in that brand. I think the biggest challenge is how do you create something that can be an embroidery,
Mhm.
for a baseball cap, or how do you, simplify, like you said, simplify those elements so that it's a quick read,
Yeah.
because otherwise you could get really busy. I think part of the way that I approached it was, it's an engine, so let's not make it like, hey, you got to see the spark plug, and you have to see the fan wheel, and you have to see the pull start, and it's like,
Yeah.
let's just give it a shape that represents an engine, and then from there, okay, let's look at the wheels, and I think to keep it and to give it a little bit of that life and character and fun, I wanted it bent. So it's kind of got that hot rodish, just ever so slight twist to it, so that it kind of looks like it's already moving.
Yeah.
It's already on its own. Typically, your wood chipper is not going to be running while you're doing it. But I thought, well, maybe he's running the bases, and so that's kind of that approach that I took to it, and I think that kind of keeps it simplified, not having to show every single element of a wheel or of the chute. And I think if you can do that, then you can get into some of these more complicated images that have lots of information, but you can really kind of let the imagination just kind of take it and then run.
Now, while you did a really great job simplifying it, like as you're describing here, it's also a remarkably close representation of the wood chipper itself, right? The one that's on
Yeah.
display in
Yep.
Fargo, North Dakota. Did you, I mean, did you go there to look at it, or did you go check it out, or do you have a bunch of photos? Like this is,
Virtually, yeah.
yeah.
Being in Arizona, that would have been a little bit of a trip.
Right. Would have been
But
easier for
yeah,
me here from Fort
yeah,
Collins.
exactly. I should have just sent you over there. Yeah, virtually, I did. I looked up as many informational, and the client sent me a lot of research and information that they had. They sent pictures of the actual chipper itself that they have there in North Dakota, where or in Fargo. They've got the actual thing there, and it's funny because it's quite the souvenir piece if you really think about it. People come in there and they put on the hat and they take pictures right next to it, and so you really had to make sure that you hit that particular chipper, because there's lots of different models out there. If it wasn't that one, it wasn't Fargo.
Well, I mean, that's sort of my question for you from a design perspective. It's a pretty realistic, one for one depiction of that particular wood chipper. Were there renderings of other styles, or was there an attempt to get away from it to make it easier on you, or to be able to scale it differently? Like, what was there the temptation to get away from that specific wood chipper and do a more generic wood chipper?
I don't think there was in the beginning. I think the client was really set
Hmm.
on it. So it was because of that, I had to make it work. With that being so iconic because of the movie and because of the history there, if I had and we did actually step away from some things, and we ended up having to come back just ever so slightly to make sure that we still represented it exactly the way they were hoping to. We did, however, though, talking to your point about like trying to simplify or have some fun with the hat. I don't know if you saw the element or the design portion for the hat.
Yeah.
We were able to break away with that and let it kind of tilt at an angle, put the foot, the cleat coming out of there. And we didn't have to have the whole machine. It all of a sudden started saying Fargo right away.
For someone like me, and we're probably a fairly similar age here. This movie was part of my formative years. I knew the movie well. I recognized exactly what was going on here with this brand right away when I saw it. But surely there are people who don't know the movie, right? The movie's 30 years old. And so I'm wondering, like,
Right.
have you encountered anyone where you're like, hey, check out this logo I did? And they're like, what am I even looking at?
So here's the irony of all of that, Paul. I was that guy.
Oh,
I knew Fargo, but
uh-huh.
I never ever had the opportunity to actually watch it. And so so I knew all the things about it. I knew all the stuff that was from it. I just had never gotten the opportunity to actually sit down and watch the movie. So when this job came, I was like, well, I better know what this movie's about. And So I did as much, I did the YouTube University thing, right? And found out as much as I could about what I needed to create. But no, you're right. There are people that I think when they look at that, they probably might be like, well, that's just a little morbid, and then put it away. It's like, well, if you don't know the movie or you don't know what it's about, then you don't get it. But it was a lot of fun. Talking about the typography in that was kind of a fun play as well. It was like it gave me an opportunity to hand letter some stuff, and to actually do that uniquely.
Well, the lettering, the wood grain pattern on the lettering, one, it references the fact that wood goes into a wood chipper, right? But it
Right.
also evokes in my mind the era of the movie, right? Like the station wagons with the wood paneling, right?
Yeah.
Like wood paneling just feels like very much of that era. Was that part of the design, or was it just that wood goes into a wood chipper?
No, I wanted something to reflect. I didn't just want it to be a name like Wood Chippers and then it was Times New Roman, and people are like, oh, that's great. And so I was kind of like, no, this needs to have that organic wood chipper feel.
Yeah.
And so I wanted the minute they were able to pull that off, like we did, and be able to use that on a uniform or whatever they were going to do with it, to be able to have a callback
Hmm.
to that primary logo. I wanted that to really be able to showcase that, hey, this is organic. Yes, it does go in a wood chipper, but it also has nods back to the Fargo. And so that was kind of the thing. Because if you notice, we put the snow on it. There's a little bit of those little tie-ins that kind of helped really solidify that.
I spent a week in Dickinson, North Dakota, and it snowed sideways the entire time I was there. So the snow
You
on
understand the
the design
snow.
elements there.
I
Now,
should have probably put the icicles parallel, right? Instead
well, I
of,
was sort of thinking that, right? Like
yeah.
the other question that I had was I saw that the baseball with the hat coming out of the chute there. At any point, did you consider putting a face on that baseball, like it is was actually like a
Like
human
it was a
head coming out
human
there?
head coming out.
And
you know,
and would
I
the face have had little X's for eyes?
yeah, I know, right? I didn't. I was worried. I was so worried about keeping it family friendly,
Yeah.
that I was like, oh, I can't do that. Um, Believe me, I'm sure there was lots of different points as I was creating it where I wanted to mess around with things like that, just horsing around. But then in the end, I thought, I can do this. And I've done it in the past with other clients where we do some funny stuff and then they go, oh, that's great. Put it away.
Yep.
It's like, all right, well, we'll go back to the drawing board.
Well,
So
there's a notable absence of blood in this logo, right? Like in
yes,
that scene in
yes,
the movie, as you've seen now, there's a ton of blood in that scene, and there's none
yeah,
in this logo. So
yeah, we had to keep that. It's like a Disney logo.
yeah,
Yeah, somehow everybody dies and nobody has blood on
well,
them.
so you've sort of touched on something that I wanted to ask you about, though, from a design perspective. Like as a professional graphic designer, you are delivered this very funny concept for a logo. You, as a designer, have to take a serious graphic design, illustration, logo design approach to creating something that is ultimately a pretty silly concept. How do you mesh being a serious designer with doing something fun and silly? Is it a fun process, or is it like, no, okay, I've got to create this very serious thing that is ultimately going to be funny because I treat it seriously?
Yeah, that's a great question.
It was a really contorted question. I realize
No,
I was
that's
all
all
over
right.
the place with it, but I
Yeah,
hope you can parse out what I was getting
I
at.
I was able to let it come back and kind of come back into text. So yeah, no, absolutely. I actually I've originated because of my history with the graphic design world and where I started.
Hmm.
I've always been an illustrator.
Hmm.
So my background, and not just an illustrator for commercial products, for whether it's grocery stores or retail stores or you name it, right? Movie posters, concerts, all that kind of stuff. but I was primarily actually an illustrator for cartooning. And so my brain just kind of already thinks that way.
Mhm.
I so even though I've had to kind of train myself to go the opposite direction, Paul, to
Hmm.
be more serious in my graphic design elements and how I approach graphic design and less illustrative in some areas. So when I get to work with these baseball organizations, it's like going home. It's like, oh, I get to have some fun all of a sudden. And now we get to go and we get to have, play with every stupid idea that I can think of that's dumb and funny. And I end up having to kind of almost tame it back. So yeah, so I'm kind of going the opposite direction. I'm having to make it serious because I start so far left with the funny creative side.
When I think about this big whirring mechanical device and all the parts, the leg and the baseball shooting out and the text versus another brand that you created that we featured on a previous episode, the Minot Hot Tots, which was like
Yeah.
an anthropomorphic tater tot, right? Like way simpler.
Yeah.
As a
Yeah.
designer, do you have a preference for, which is more of a challenge, which is more fun for you to
Uh,
create?
I would say it's a lot more fun to be able to create something that nobody's seen before,
Mm.
you know, because what happens is, I mean, yes, everybody's seen a tater tot, but nobody's seen a live tater tot playing baseball, and so so when you have a machine like what you're talking about here with this wood chipper, it is a little more challenging because you do have to keep it a little more, I would say, true to the actual representation of what you're drawing. And so yeah, so those are, I would say, that I would prefer, if I had my options, to create things that people haven't seen before, because when you do that, then it's kind of, you get to explore it, you get to bring it to life, you get to kind of educate the consumer on what you're illustrating.
First of all, things that people haven't seen before. The Fill It Up Regulars, which was an
Yeah,
alternate brand of the Sussex County Miners, that was one that you worked on. And I actually wanted to ask you about that sort of parallel there.
yeah,
The Fill It Up Regulars is another sort of mechanical device here, and we talked about how you take something with straight lines and sort of rigid and make it feel alive. With this wood chippers one, all the photos of the wood chipper is it's standing upright. It is
right.
a lot of straight lines, angles, hard edges, that sort of thing. And you had to sort of bring it to life, and you did that by putting it on an angle, giving it some movement with as you mentioned earlier in the interview, you talked about how it was sort of already it was leaning and it was moving. But for a machine that is typically standing upright, completely vertical. There's no vertical lines in this. There's no horizontal lines in this. Everything is on an angle. Even the whole sort of feeling of the device is on an angle. Obviously intentional, but not an easy thing to do.
Correct. Because your mind says, no, that's supposed to be straight. And
Right.
you're like, no, I gotta bend that. If I don't bend that, then it's not gonna have that feeling, And so again, it kind of ties back to my illustrative days where I was doing a lot of cartooning of vehicles. So I did a lot of the old, Big Daddy Roth style kind of looks and that. And so that's kind of where my mind started to go with this mechanical piece here. I thought, if I had a wood chipper and it was alive, it probably wants to drag race. And so I kind of was thinking, those kinds of things.
Well, when I saw that your name was attached to this project, I was not surprised. I was just like, yeah, yeah, yeah. This is
Oh, thank you.
this feels like John. John, congratulations. It's super fun, and I appreciate you taking a minute to chat with me about it. This is just
Absolutely.
a really fun brand. And in the meantime, where can people find you online? Where can people follow you on social media, check out your website, that sort of thing?
You can go to worthendesign.com. You can also go to Worthen Design on Instagram as well. That would probably be the very best places to give me a shout.
That will be in the show notes so people can come find you. John, I can't wait to talk to you again because every time we do, it's a really fun brand. So
I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you, Paul. I enjoy these. These are a lot of fun.
happy baseball season to you. Stay cool there in Arizona.
Yes, I will try.
Try to
Yeah,
try to channel that Fargo weather.
I know. I wouldn't mind a few icicles right now. It'd be nice.
Welcome back to Baseball by Design. Baseball by Design's very own film critic, filmography expert, Jim Christopher. Jim, host of Ballpark Nation. Welcome back to Baseball by Design.
I was telling Jess as I drove to work, I was like, all of a sudden we have all the segments. We've gone like it's like fun. I'm in this, and by the way, this is a great one to go to because I adore this film.
Well, we have had some fun talking about movies recently in recent episodes, and you're back to talk about the 1996 Coen Brothers classic, Fargo. The Fargo-Moorhead RedHawks are playing as the Fargo Woodchippers. This wood chipper is hilarious. It's on display at a visitor center in Fargo. Like it's, the identity of Fargo, North Dakota has really become closely associated with this movie and that scene. How do we take a grisly, horrible murder scene in which Steve Buscemi is getting fed into a wood chipper and turn it into a baseball identity?
Well, they did it. It's funny because my connection with this brand, if you will, goes back to the pandemic. Because Andrew Nelson and I had gone up to see the Fargo-Moorhead RedHawks. They were one of the few teams playing. And I had suggested this idea to the team.
Oh.
You guys should be the Woodchippers.
Oh, wait a minute.
And I don't know that I'm getting any royalties for that.
Yeah.
And there's actually video of me going into every Home Depot I could find in the area asking to buy a wood chipper, and they didn't see me. I was disappointed. I think the biggest thing, Paul, is you can do this as an indie club. I don't know that an affiliated team gets away with this. And in fact, out for delivery right now are my 3 items I've purchased from the team.
Very nice.
Because they really didn't do a whole lot to soften exactly what happens in that scene with this logo.
Yeah.
And I think it begins and ends with being an indie club where you have a little bit more leeway to get away with stuff. And they really did run with it.
This movie, it's 30 years old. The 30th anniversary of this movie is an excuse to take this and make a baseball identity. Let's talk about the movie itself.
Sure.
What is the significance of this movie in the larger scheme of American cinema?
Well, first, I think it speaks to the Coen brothers as a group. And I don't think I can talk about Fargo without talking about them as a filmmaking duo.
Yeah.
And I think the word genius is thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
I will tell you that I believe the Coen brothers to be genius because as somebody who knows film, I either love or hate all of their movies, and I'm not in the middle in any of them. And I will do a shout out to my brother-in-law, Nathan, who, when I first saw Fargo, I didn't like it as much.
Okay.
But he absolutely adores this movie. And so it was enough for me to go and look at it again. And I walked out with a completely 180-degree turn to it. I think the accent as a kid bugged me when it first came out.
It seems fake until you go there, right?
Well, 100%. It seems fake until you go there. Really and truly, I think them blending, and it will become a hallmark for them going forward. It blended this very dry sense of humor that the Coen brothers have in much of their work, The Big Lebowski and on and on and on, with a really grisly, well put together cop procedural that also plays as a slice of life movie.
Yeah.
Because Coen brothers are never really concerned with resolving their crimes always in their movies. Sometimes you get the resolution and you sort of stumble upon it. Sometimes you don't. And in this movie, I think they do a really good job of blending. Like you're laughing at stuff that when you take a step back,
Right.
you're an accent away from this being a Hitchcockian thriller, not this comedic thing that they're able to put together.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to get back to the place Fargo, because I think, and I love that you have been there and you were going around Home Depots looking for looking for a wood chipper. This movie has become really inextricably tied to this place, and the place has been inextricably tied to the movie. when we talked about American Graffiti being and its connection to Modesto, California, there was sort of a similar thing. The two couldn't exist without each other. One of the things that's interesting to me about this Woodchippers alternate identity is it's the town just saying like, yeah, this is us. Like we're not going to fight it anymore. Like we're not going to resist if people are just like, oh, Fargo, that's the movie, that's Woodchippers. As a person who loves film and a person who loves traveling for baseball, what's your take on that? When you went to Fargo for baseball, was there also a part of you that's just like, I'm here also at the scene of this classic movie?
1000%.
Yeah.
And what I thought was interesting is that you could talk to people about the movie and they would talk about the movie.
Uh-huh.
And I use that as in the comparison to when I went and visited the Martha's Vineyard Sharks in the New England Baseball League where Jaws was filmed. And they don't want to talk about Jaws there.
Huh.
It's very interesting. But yeah, I think it's funny because I think North Dakota, there's the joke, right? That every couple of years, there's even a West Wing episode about it where we'd like to remove the word North because it sounds cold. Well, it is cold. So, and so I think that when you can find something that's quirky and fun like that and run with it, I can see why you're okay with it being part of your identity. The other thing being is like it isn't even just that Fargo was the movie, but it then spun like five seasons of a TV show as well.
Right.
Was really, really well regarded. So I think what it shows you is that the people of Fargo have the right kind of sense of humor because you can see very easily, well, it's a violent movie, and why would we want to be associated with a violent movie? But yet the idea that they're not afraid to run toward it as opposed to running from it, to me, is a real testament to them.
One of the things that makes me laugh here is basing this identity on a movie that you can't really show. You just have to assume everyone knows the movie. Maybe you can show clips from it, but not only is it an identity based on a grisly murder scene, it's an identity based on a movie that the kids should not be watching.
It's funny. It's not that different in some of the ways that we talked about with the Hill City Howlers, how they have to kind of be careful with how they represent it. And I mean, I think you're right. I think that this is definitely an identity that's going to appeal to a certain age. However, it's the age that has money to spend. If you're going to do a identity based on K-pop Demon Hunters, you don't. That's not a group of people that's core audience that has a lot of disposable income. Not only did I buy a sweatshirt and a t-shirt, but I bought the hat. They made the hat with the thing and you get the logo. So, but yeah, I do think that's probably part of the fun of knowing, well, we can't really show it, but those who know. And I think people like being in on an inside joke. So I think in some ways, kind of not being able to show the movie might play in their favor.
So I'm dying to know here. You ordered 3 items. One of them is this, like, it sounds like you're the hat. Did you get the hat?
Got the hat.
You got the hat.
The hat with the muffs, and I'll never get to wear it here, but
no, definitely not. You're in Texas, but it is, it's the fuzzy warm hat. I actually have that hat for the Phillies. I have I call it my Phillies Elmer Fudd hat. I have
okay.
I also have a Phillies Jimmy Rollins hat that he wore in the 2008 World Series with the ear flaps. It's like a baseball cap with ear flaps. That's a good one. And then, there's other items. What other items did you get from the team store?
I went t-shirt and sweatshirt.
Okay.
I recently had my storage for my jerseys explode, so I've had to do a cataloging. And I have 178 baseball jerseys, and you know how much those jerseys cost. So I think I need to go t-shirts for a while.
Yes. Yeah.
So that was why. But I am actually going to see about trying to get up there for one of the games. I think they're playing like 6 times as the Woodchippers, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't reached out to the team yet because I want to, because it's a haul to get up there, as you know.
Yes, even from Fort Collins, Colorado.
Yeah, I mean, it's a at least Fargo you can fly into, because I covered Bismarck on the same trip, and then that was a haul across state.
Yeah.
But not that the North Dakota Visitors Bureau needs my help, but beautiful state. Beautiful to drive through.
All right. Well, I want to let you get out of here because it's opening day and there's baseball happening now. You are wearing your Houston Astros stuff. I am wearing my Philadelphia Phillies stuff. It is opening day and both of our teams are playing, not each other, thankfully. But this is I want to get your final thoughts on this. Super fun identity. Love that it came to fruition. 30th anniversary. What final thoughts on the Fargo Woodchippers?
My final thoughts really are kind of a macro one of don't sleep on independent leagues. I think you and I both love affiliated minor league baseball, and I love a lot what they're doing, but they can't be as daring anymore as they used to be. But you can do that in the indie leagues. And so I think for those of us that are ballpark hunters or ballpark merch hunters or whatever, don't sleep on those guys because a lot of those teams like the Fargo Moorhead RedHawks are established brands with good looks in and of themselves, and they're able to have some more fun. And I think if that's your bag, keep an eye on them.
Not only are they able to do more because they don't have the same restrictions that Major League Baseball would impose on them,
Sure.
but they're able to do it way more quickly too, right? Like, I mean, the timeline now for alternate identities in affiliated minor league baseball is literally years, like year and a half, 2 years.
And here's a sneak peek at Ballpark Nation episode 5. When we interviewed Greg Coleman from the Erie Seawolves, they were
Yeah.
shocked when they did the Mammoth thing because usually it's an
Yeah.
18 months minimum.
Yeah. But well, Major League Baseball was motivated to make that Mammoth thing happen, right?
That's why
Yeah,
they were
for
so
sure.
shocked by it because normally 18 months is what the lead time is. And
Yeah.
I can't think about what I'm doing next week. I can't imagine trying to plan an alternate brand 18 months in advance.
You mentioned Ballpark Nation, available now. Jim, where can people watch Ballpark Nation? What is Ballpark Nation for people who are not familiar?
Ballpark Nation is our baseball travel show, second season of which you're a writer on the show. And right now, season 2 has launched with the aforementioned Durham Bulls episode, in which we're featuring a very fun interview with William O'Leary, who played Jimmy in Bull Durham, which was just a super fun interview. For those of you out there that are Hot Shots fans, he also talks a little Hot Shots, so there's that.
Nice.
But we're excited because it's on YouTube now, and now it's on Apple's new video podcast, which I'm just loving the interface for that. So that's where you can find us. If you go to ballparknationusa.com, there's a link to get you there. And it's going to be a fun season, Paul, because we're going to do 8 individual episodes, and then we've cut everything into smaller, more consumable segments throughout the summer. So however you want to consume it, it shall be consumable.
It is expertly produced. Your background is in film and video production, and so it has it's professionally produced. It's a joy to watch. I am proud to play a small part in the show, but it's a joy to watch. You guys, season 2's ramping up now. By the time this episode drops, there'll be a few more episodes out. So go check out Ballpark Nation, where Jim told you to. Jim, thank you so much. We'll see you next time. There's another movie-based minor league baseball identity.
I need one of these to be once a week, so I just keep coming on the show. That's what
There you go. We'll just set up a regular time.
I need it.
Awesome. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Deep within the recesses of his secret headquarters, somewhere in Louisville, Kentucky, sits Dan Simon. By day, Dan is the owner of Studio Simon, but by night, he tries to stump one Paul Caputo. This is Studio Simon Stumper.
All right, everyone, welcome back. It is Dan Simon, founder, principal designer of Studio Simon, the prolific Louisville-based design firm responsible for so many great logos in minor league baseball. And yet, amid all of that work that Dan does every single week, Dan is back once again with a Studio Simon Stumper trivia question. Dan, how have you been hanging out during all those interviews?
I have been and still am fantastic. Let's get into this. We're going to Fargo.
Yeah.
I want to preface this question by saying this is, I think, unfortunately, one of the ones where you're either going to know it or you're just going to have to take a guess, and you've got a 1 out of 3 shot. So here you go. Our Studio Simon Stumper today asks, which of these noted home run hitters played their high school ball in Fargo? Was it A, Harmon Killebrew, B, Roger Maris, or C, Mel Ott?
I was hoping you might say Richie Ashburn because he's from somewhere in the upper Midwest, or was. He has sadly passed away many years ago. I don't know if this is just an I'm going to know it or I'm not, or if I am taking a wild stab at this, but I do feel something picking at the back of my brain that is yelling at me to respond that the answer is Roger Maris.
Final answer?
Final answer, Roger Maris.
Well, I don't like when I give you ones that you have to guess at without really being able to suss it out. But I do like when I do so and you get it right.
Roger Maris.
Yes. He was not born in Fargo. He was born in Hibbing, Minnesota.
Oh.
At age 4, moved to Grand Forks, North Dakota.
Okay.
That would be in 1938. And then when he was 14 in 1948, he moved to Fargo and played his high school ball there. Harmon Killebrew would be the next closest. He was born in Payette, Idaho.
Okay.
So he's sort of from that region.
Yeah.
Melott was not. He was born in Gretna, Louisiana, which is a suburb of New Orleans. I wouldn't expect you to know that. And frankly, when I was trying to come up with a question for this episode, and I kind of honed in on let's do something about Fargo, I don't even remember when I was doing the research for this, how I came upon Roger Maris having played there, other than, like with what you just said when you were answering the question, there was something in the back of my mind, my brain, where it's like, I kind of feel like there was a noted home run hitter there, and it might have been Roger Maris. Frankly, I did my research for this question, I think a couple of weeks ago. Listeners, Paul will give me about sometimes 3, I think once we might have done 4, but usually like 3 episodes worth of stumpers to do that. I'm pulling back the curtain here. We will record 3 stumpers in one recording session. Oof. And so this particular stumper was researched 2 or 3 weeks ago, and out of sight, out of mind, don't remember exactly how I honed in on this, other than there was just this like thing in the back of my head about Roger Maris. So.
I'm going to redact and bleep all of this, Dan. I don't want anyone to know that we record 3 stumpers. That I'm sitting here right now, just minutes removed from getting the World Baseball Classic Puerto Rico stumper wrong. But for listeners in real time, that was a week ago. If you're listening to this 1 week at a time, as it is intended to be consumed. I was thinking, Dan, that there might have been a scene in Fargo where, one of the characters was wearing a baseball cap and you were going to ask me what team it was, something like that. But I didn't research any of that. I don't know if there's a baseball cap in the movie Fargo. I assumed that what might happen is there might be a question about, like, in 1912, there was a team and what was the name of that team. And so, but I didn't, as always, I did not research any of it before the actual episode, because that keeps it fun, keeps us on our toes, and makes for an entertaining Studio Simon Stumper segment every single week. And guess what? There's going to be another Studio Simon Stumper next week, and it'll be every bit as entertaining as this one. Dan, we'll see you next week.
I will see you then.